Welcome to the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce Education Committee Network's PAC 14 TV show, Education is Everybody's Business. My name is Ladd Colston. I am a business member with the Chamber and the CEO of Sustainable Visions, LLC. Today, we will introduce year 3 of this informative PAC 14 TV show by looking at Eastern Shore concerns that matter. Our first episode will feature the educational topic, child abuse and juvenile crime, shore concerns that matter. Sponsored by the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore, Chamber CEO Bill Chambers, and our Education Committee Network members want this TV show to be a source of community awareness and knowledge of topics that impact education and workforce development here on Maryland's Lower Eastern Shore. We appreciate your listening in and providing us with your feedback on its usefulness. Both juvenile crime and child abuse are community issues that exist across the country. Here on our Lower Eastern Shore, we are experiencing a visible uptick that warrants public concern, knowledge, and investigation. And to help us understand its impact on education and workforce development, I have invited Ms. Jamie Dykes, State's Attorney, to be my co-host, and 2 special guests with knowledge and experience to discuss these concerns and some potential solutions. To begin, let's look at our current reality. In the state of Maryland, neglect comprises 65% of all child abuse types, followed by sexual abuse at 26%, physical abuse at 22%, and lastly, emotional abuse at 2%. As portrayed in his book, Invisible Children and What We Can Do About It, author Mike Tikkanen notes that years of medical science have shown how abuse and neglect interrupts brain development and alters how children learn and handle stress. Extreme anxiety, self-hate, and self-harm often accompany abuse. Let's face it, sitting in a classroom, learning math, history, or language requires a calm and focused mind, something children suffering from abuse, trauma, and anxiety don't have. Behavioral problems that abused children bring into the classroom lead to failures in socializing, learning, and often result in school failure. On the flip side, teachers without trauma-informed skills are clearly unable to manage traumatized students. The drama escalates and often becomes frightening and dangerous. That's why teacher turnover is so high and schools struggle to achieve higher levels of performance and/or lower dropout rates. In addition, the topic of juvenile crime can be directly related to trauma experienced by children in the home and/or in their neighborhood or community. The primary reasons juveniles commit crimes are often influenced by violent or abusive social interactions and relationships with family and peers. Again, in the state of Maryland, it should be noted that theft, auto theft, department store theft, is the greatest cause of youth arrest, followed by simple assault, drug use, disorderly conduct, and curfew violations. For an inside view of this topic, let's welcome my co-host for this episode, Miss Jamie Dykes.
Good morning.
Good morning. And to provide a brief introduction for our viewing audience of you and this episode topic, I have a few questions for you.
Of course.
The first one is, what is the role of the state's attorney's office as it pertains to child abuse and juvenile crime here in the county and on the Lower Eastern Shore?
Okay. The Office of the State's Attorney essentially those are two separate roles. Mm-hmm. So the State's Attorney's Office is a partner with the Wicomico County Child Advocacy Center. The Child Advocacy Center investigates and prosecutes child abuse and neglect cases. The ARM, we'll hear from Jamie Manning shortly, the Life Crisis Center is another partner, and their responsibility as part of the CAC is to treat victims of child abuse. It is essentially a one-stop shop for victims of child abuse and neglect. And then regarding juvenile crime, the state's attorney's role is to prosecute juveniles if it's warranted for offenses that the legislature indicates that it's appropriate for us to prosecute. And juvenile court, the goal is and always has been rehabilitation. So that's the state's attorney's role with regard to juvenile crime and child abuse.
Well, that's good news. Rehabilitation.
Yes.
That's critical.
Absolutely.
I got a second question. Have you observed or witnessed an uptick in these two areas since COVID-19, or has it been the opposite?
So I won't really tie them to COVID-19 as much as in 2022, the Maryland's General Assembly essentially stripped the juvenile court of authority to assist juveniles and provide services for especially younger juveniles when those services are most able to assist those juveniles in becoming rehabilitated. So that is where we have seen an increase in violent crime involving juveniles, especially violent crime involving guns with juveniles, sadly.
Wow, that's interesting. So that's at the state level.
That is now, thankfully, last legislative session, the legislature, with the governor's leadership, has corrected course so that, to some extent, has reinstituted the juvenile court's authority in some measure. It's certainly not where it needs to be, but in some measure to help juveniles and their families who need services.
Gotcha. So what have you found to be some of the major causes of both child abuse and juvenile crime here in the county or regionally here on the Eastern Shore?
There is a remarkable overlap, with chronic neglect. And that comes in many forms. That comes when parents are dealing in and distributing, manufacturing illegal substances, controlled dangerous substances, whether they're so involved in that trade or involve their children in that trade. They simply don't have the life skills to be productive parents and provide what children need to thrive. but also, and I believe that Ms. Manning will talk about that, in domestic violence cases, right? There's neglect that happens there, where children witness abuse, domestic abuse among spouses, and the effect that that has on children. It leaves children, that trauma response leaves children who don't receive treatment to suffer, in many instances, lifelong consequences. Many of them end up engaging in crime. Some don't, of course, but the correlation is too high.
Yeah, which coincides with some of the national statistics that we have conveyed here for this particular episode. Wow. Well, to help our viewing audience understand and appreciate the magnitude of this topic, we have invited two frontline professionals to share with us what they see, and they are
Jamie Manning, Executive Director of Life Crisis, and Amy Rhodes with Wicomico County Public Schools.
All right.
Ms. Manning, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Now, in your role as Executive Director of the Life Crisis Center, what trends have you seen with regard to child abuse and neglect in the county and on the Lower Eastern Shore?
So yeah, in Wicomico County specifically and the other Tri-County area, we see sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, also known as mental injury, and neglect cases.
Okay. Since COVID-19, have you seen an increase or decrease, or has there been any other recent trend that's notable to you?
Okay, so in 2020, overlapping into 2021, obviously there was abuse happening in homes. We just didn't know a lot about it. It was really underreported, and we saw an uptick once schools started reopening. That was children's safety nets. When youth activities resumed, more so in 2021, we saw an increase in neglect cases and your severe physical abuse cases. Families were stressed, high stress due to our economic situation. There was loss of jobs, loss of resources, which contributed to also a lot of domestic violence that was being seen in households. And a benefit of schools reopening and youth activities resuming, churches opening and so forth, was that kids felt safe again. They could talk about what was happening in their households. Adults could also talk about what was happening. And when we saw these increases, we know through our Child Advocacy Center in Wicomico County that 310 cases passed in that time period from January 2020 till December of 2021 through our CAC, with 65% being sexual abuse cases, 20% over that time period being severe physical abuse that our CAC team worked on, and then some criminal neglects.
Okay, wow. What do you see today as some of the most pressing domestic needs or social determinants of health that may be creating or causing violent or trauma-induced assaults or abuse of children in the community?
So there's a lot of factors that go into the social determinants of child abuse, some being lack of affordable health care, lack of resources, again, educational gaps. Housing instability is huge for our area in Wicomico County. And when families have that additional stress, that's when we see the cases coming out. And also things like mental health, unaddressed trauma can contribute to our increase in cases. Substance abuse can as well.
Now, are there enough resources locally?
There aren't. That's one of the biggest problems here on the shore as a whole. Mental health resources. We're all kind of competing to have therapists and whatnot and psychologists and psychiatrists down here on the shore. We've improved as a community, but there's still that need. We're on a different side of the bridge, as people often say, and we really need that. The housing and the mental health gaps are huge down here.
Wow. What lifeline services does the Life Crisis Center provide to victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse?
So we provide an array of services. We wrap around families and children. We currently have a 24/7 hotline. We answer 988 and 211 for the 9 counties on the shore, but we also answer our own crisis local line. We have a safe house shelter for victims fleeing intimate partner violence, and have that immediate need, and transitional housing with that to help them get on their feet as well. We will also provide free legal services for victims to help file protective orders. And we offer counseling, an array of counseling that's trauma-informed for our victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and human trafficking. We also will provide services for them as well. We do a lot of outreach and education. That's where we saw a lot of the reports coming out in 2021. The more outreach and education we did, the more individuals were reporting and making their phone calls.
For members of the audience that might not know, what does trauma-informed mean, trauma-informed care?
So
And why is it different? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's all right. So working from where that individual is, everything needs to be individualized. There's no cookie cutter way that's going to work for everyone. Looking at things through a trauma-informed lens, that's a big thing we do with our CAC partners. We look for where the individual is working from and help them and guide their needs. Not victim blaming. A lot of that happens often in the community just because people don't understand. They've never lived that experience, and so they don't understand, why does that woman who's being abused go back to her abuser? There's many reasons. And we really work with individuals at Life Crisis to help the individual work at their pace when they're ready to leave a violent situation. We safety plan and so on. And we also work with the children and helping them get to a place of healing.
Wow. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for all you do for the community and the lower 3 counties.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It takes a village.
It does. It does. Thanks. Hi, Miss Rhodes. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks so much for being here today. Please introduce yourself, your position, what you do with the public schools.
Sure. My name is Amy Rhodes. I'm the supervisor of secondary school counseling for Wycomico County Public Schools.
Please tell us what challenges the school system has faced in recent years, say in the last 5 years, and what is different about the prior period.
I would say one of the challenges that we've had is student attendance. So since the pandemic, we spent a lot of time trying to locate students that didn't return when we returned to in-person learning. So that was a huge impact. And then, since then, we still have about 25% of our students that are chronically absent. So, and when we look at the reasons for that, a lot of that has to do with anxiety. Anxiety is at an all-time high right now. Especially coming out of the pandemic, students, feeling uncomfortable coming back to school. They've missed out on a lot of social interaction that they've had, and then they've been hiding behind their cell phones and their computer screens. So, just the removal from peer-to-peer interaction, from being able to socialize with staff and students, has had a great impact on students and how they're learning in the schools. And then, behind the phones, we've got the bullying issues as well. Mm-hmm. So that certainly plays into it, and it plays into student attendance. We've seen an increase in severity of the behaviors of some of our primary school students. So these are students that during the pandemic, they weren't going to school at all, and they had never been in school. So once they started attending, we've had to spend a lot of extra time helping them with social skills, helping them with coping skills. A lot of our students are really lacking at all ages being able to cope and self-manage. So those are some of the challenges we've been experiencing.
Wow. How is it that you address some of those? I know there's a multitude of ways that the public schools address those, but can you give us some insight in a few of those solutions?
I think one of the biggest things is we have become very much more focused on trauma-informed care. Recognizing that students have experienced a lot of trauma, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have witnessed, something terrible or had something terrible experience, or something that they experienced that was terrible. But it might be just the impact of being removed from socialization for that period of time. So our school counselors and our school social workers have already had extensive training in trauma-informed care. So, they receive regular updated trainings as time goes on. However, we are working as a district to provide additional training to our teachers and our instructional staff so that they have more tools and more interventions that they could use right in the classroom with students, because they're the ones that are seeing them most every single day. So, recognizing different signs and symptoms of trauma is really important. And then when they do see these things, they can go ahead and refer to a school counselor or social worker to provide extra services to the students. So we also have a multilingual trauma-informed training coming up for some of our staff as well, recognizing that our population of multilingual learners has exploded in our county. We have lots more students, and recognizing that the path that they had to go through to get here has been very traumatic for a lot of them as well. So just giving, again, some extra tools and resources for students and for staff to be able to manage those behaviors and manage the support that they need in the classroom.
Wow, lots of meaningful services being provided by the school system. Oh, wow. Can you talk, it's easy to get lost in, some of the negative things sometimes. Can you talk about some positive observations and experiences that you and your counseling staff are seeing as students prepare for professional and technical career post-graduation?
Sure. I think, again, kind of going back to the trauma-informed care, recognizing that and providing more awareness to that has been actually a positive, because it's allowed us to kind of look at our programs, look at what interventions we have for students, and give them more individualized support. So our student services teams, it's not a one-size-fits-all. We have to look at each individual student and determine what does that student need, what does their family need. Over the years, we've added more school social workers to our schools, so now we have at least one in every school in our county, which is a huge benefit. And then we've also added community school coordinators over the last few years, and they act as a liaison between the school and the student and the families and the community. So we are recognizing that, obviously, the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. It really does. We can't do it all in the schools, and we know that the parent can't do it all. So we really need to work together, and those community school coordinators are working to be that liaison, bringing the community into the schools, and then also providing extra resources and support to the students. So although there might have been some negatives, we're definitely seeing a turn. We're seeing a lot more positive things happening in the schools, and students are really responding well to that.
No, that's great. Well, thank you for appearing today and for all the work that you and all the members of Wycomico County Public Schools are doing on behalf of the community and your students. So we do appreciate it, and best wishes for a successful school year ahead.
Thank you for having me.
As we close out this informative episode, I would like to personally and professionally thank Ms. Jamie Dykes for precious time and support in co-hosting this critical education and workforce-related topic to start our season or year 3 of Education is Everybody's Business. This topic was unanimously voted number 1 by our Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce Education Committee Network members as the most preferred topic for year 3 of our PAC 14 TV show. Well, this brings us to a close for episode 1. Please tune in as we present our second episode of Sure Concerns That Matter with the topic, the challenges of immigrant language and cultural differences. Until then, remember, education is everybody's business.